Right now, this component is rendering static output. In order to render to-dos dynamically, we need to give our component state. We'll start by adding a constructor to the app component class. I'll start by adding the constructor keyword at the top of the class, and then inside my constructor, I want to call super to make sure that the constructor for the component class that we're extending gets called. And now I can define the state for this component. So I'm going to start with this dot state, and I'm going to set that to equal an empty object. The state object will contain whatever data structures our component needs to render properly. In our case, this is going to include a list of to-dos. So I'm going to start by giving this a to-dos property, and I'm going to set that to equal an array. And this array is going to be a list of objects, each object representing a to-do. So each to-do is going to have an ID, and we'll make that a number. It's also going to have a name, which will be a string. And I'll give it an isComplete flag. That'll be a Boolean. We'll just mark them all as false for right now. So I'm going to duplicate this, add my commas, and update my numbers. And I'm just going to borrow the text that we already have. And now we have 3 to-dos ready to go. So saving this will update the browser, and we won't see any change because we haven't actually updated the render. What we can do though is open up our Chrome DevTools. And you'll see in my DevTools I have this React tab, and I've installed this from the Chrome Web Store, so you can just install it. It's the React DevTools. And with this, we can actually take a look at what's going on within our components. So we'll see here at the top level I have my app component, and you can see the render JSX in here. And over to the right, I have props, which at the moment is an empty object, and I have my state, which currently reflects our 3 to-dos. And each of those objects is in there with its ID, name, and isComplete flag. So for now, I'm just going to minimize this to get it out of the way. And now I want to update my component to render based on the state rather than just rendering the static to-dos. So I'll drop down into my render method, and inside the UL, I want to reference this.state.todos. And I'll do that using curly braces to separate my new JavaScript from the surrounding JSX. We get this.state.todos. And for each to-do, I want to return the JSX that's going to represent what we had in our static markup, which is a list item with an input and the name of our to-do. And in order to do that, I can use a map. So the map function will take its own function that'll get a to-do, and it'll pass that into our mapping function. And all I want to do is return something that looks like this with this to-do's properties. So for now, I'll just take this learn JSX and I'll make that a reference to to-do.name. And because I'm inside of JSX again, I need to separate that out with curly braces. And now I can remove these other 2 LIs. I'll save it and let's see what we get. We'll get our output, but this time it's coming from the state rather than that static output because we've removed that. So I've brought my DevTools back up, and I'll see over here I have some errors and some warnings. So let's go into the console and see what's going on. And the warning here is that each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key prop. And this is going to help React when it does its diffing and virtual DOM updates to perform better. So what we need to do is go into where we're creating our multiple LIs and give each LI a key property, and it has to have a unique value. So in this case, I'm just going to use todo.id, and we'll save that, and we'll see our warning goes away. The other crucial part of our to-do is the isCompleted flag, and right now we're rendering a checkbox, but we're not checking or unchecking the box based on that isComplete flag. So I'm going to jump back into the code, and up at the top of my class, I'm going to update this first item to be true. I'm going to drop down into the render method, and in my map I'm just going to break this out into multiple lines so it's a little easier to read. And now I want to set my inputs check state based on the to-dos isComplete flag. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to say checked equals, and in curly braces I'm going to say to-do dot isComplete, and I'm going to save that. And we'll see that our first item is now checked. But if we look at our DevTools, we have a warning. And the warning's telling us that we provided a checked property on a form without an onChange handler. At the moment, we don't have an onChange handler, so the way we can get rid of this warning is to change that checked property to default checked. So I'll switch back into the code and we'll make this say default, capitalize the C, and I'll save that. The browser will reload. We'll still get our checkbox, but if we look at our DevTools, that warning is gone.